Welcome back to Rich Dad's Stockcast. I'm your host, Denney, and today we're drawing a hard line between two very different mindsets, the amateur investor and the professional investor. Amateurs chase tips, react to headlines, hope that things work out. Professionals think in systems, manage risk, and stay disciplined no matter what the market is doing. Today, Rich Dad expert Andy Tanner is here to break down exactly how professionals think and how you can start adopting that mindset immediately. And before we get into it, go to stockcastbonus.com, grab your free investing tools. If you want to stop guessing and start thinking like the pros, this is where it begins. Andy, welcome back.
Thanks, Del. There's no shortage. When you announced that topic, my mind was flooded with lessons actually from Robert Kiyosaki. I thought in fact, there's two that I think are at the top of the list on that. I don't like putting words in his mouth because he's fully capable of expressing his views, but I do think I have a responsibility to pass on good wisdom when I've heard it. So I'll do my best.
All right. I can't wait to tap into that. But speaking of wisdom, stockcastbonus.com, what do our listeners receive when they go there?
Professional. Be a pro. That fits perfect.
There you go.
Go download the stuff. Check out what's there. If you want to be a professional, learn how to be. We just talked about be, do, have. Be a professional. Professionals are competent. Right? They're competent. They learn stuff. It's a wonderful thing. I had a phone call from a really good buddy of mine I'd heard from a while. He's traveling to Jackson Hole. He's on a drive and he's bored. So I guess he called Andy and he says, "What's going on, man?" This guy played in the NBA for, I think, 11 years and had a great career, won a championship with Shaq with the Miami Heat. And he, when we coached together, we coached our boys together for a year or so. And I was blown away that an 11-year veteran, that's professional, an 11-year veteran in the NBA, he'd been coached by Chuck Daly, Pat Riley, Doc Rivers. We had the commonality of being coached in college by Rick Majerus. Those are pretty damn good coaches. Pat Riley, guys like that. And he would go to camps and he would sign up to learn more. That's a pro. That's a professional. That guy had more basketball knowledge in his freaking pinky than I had in my whole body. And he's studying the game after playing it for 11 years, 82 games a year. I mean, that's 800 games plus playoffs. So he's probably got 1,000 professional games. That's 1,000 more than I have under my belt. And he's trying to learn more. So if you think you know everything, you don't. Go to stockcastbonus.com and see if you can learn something. So go there, be a pro. So there you go.
I love that, what you just distinguished there, professional versus the amateur. And I want to dig a little bit more to that. What's the biggest difference you see between an amateur investor and a professional investor? Let's set kind of a base there.
Well, I'll defer to my own opinions a little bit, and I'm going to go with we were studying a book, and we used to do these book studies, and there was a book called Turning Pro that we studied. And when Robert Kiyosaki studies a book, it's not like we're reading it, man. And the way it was is you'd have a certain amount of time to read it, and you'd read it. And man, you see that guy mark up a book. I mean, the thing's destroyed with tabs, and he destroys those books. He won't do a Kindle. He needs it in his hand to mark it and tab it. He just sucks everything out. We had a rule. So then we go to Phoenix and we spend 3 days, and we weren't allowed to give our opinion on the book. So you read this whole book and you're not allowed to give your opinion on it. You check your opinion at the door, because an opinion is what you already think you know. Mm-hmm. Well, let me tell you my opinion on this. Let me give you my take on this. Let me give my opinion on this. How are you learning if you're just referring to what you already believe? So you would check your opinion at the door, and every time you spoke, we had a rule. It had to start with this: what the author said was. And then you had to quote the book. And then you say, not my opinion on it. What's he saying? What's this guy really saying? And that's how, I mean, it was intense. Those rules were unbreakable, right? And for 3 days, we do that stuff. Well, one of the things that Robert said in that meeting that I came away with, this is, and it's rough to work at the Cash Flow Academy because ever since then, I put everyone on our team in one of these categories. You know, when we hire someone new, amateurs cause problems, professionals solve problems. That's like, I don't have any, you know, I've got 4 little tattoos. I should tattoo that one big somewhere, you know. Amateurs cause problems. Professionals solve problems. And that's a great place to start. Because, I mean, what you don't really need to expand and unpack that.
That is such
It's just there.
That is such a good mindset. And going back to the book, I think it was Stephen Pressfield wrote the book they were talking about. Phenomenal read. I absolutely love it because I try to think, am I being an amateur right now or am I being a professional? How am I showing up? And one of the things that I want to talk about is the difference between results and processes. Amateurs tend to focus on outcomes while professionals focuses on processes.
100%.
So what's some processes that we should think about as stock investors? How can I be more of a professional in my thinking?
4 pillars. I mean, the 4 pillars is a process. What are the fundamentals? What are the technicals? What are the cash flow? What's the risk management? That's a process, right? That's a checklist, a pre-flight checklist that we go through, and quite frankly, it solves a lot of problems. And bad processes cause problems, and good processes solve problems. Consumers have problems. Entrepreneurs are solving their problems, and the money flows to the problems solvers. Solving problems is valuable. And if you can solve someone's problem, then you're functionally competent. One of the phrases Robert would say a lot is people that leave college are often functionally incompetent, meaning that they can regurgitate a lot of stuff. They read some books for 4 years, and this is what I studied and got my A's on it. Now I know a lot of stuff. But as far as applying that and functional, which I'll land on this later. We'll finish my own take maybe in the second half or something. But the idea that they're functionally incompetent, meaning that what do I need in my business? I've never asked anyone that works for me about their college degree. I don't even know if they have them, to tell you the truth. I just want to know if they can do the job and solve the problem. And then if they have a process, like you mentioned, that can bring a result, because the results come via the process, right? So you're refining, when you look at KPIs, which are results, you're looking at the process behind them. And that's the KPIs spur the creativity to improve process. So yeah, professionals have processes and they solve problems, and amateurs cause them.
I like that. You mentioned a word, and I don't want to gloss over. You said pre-flight checklist, and it makes me think of a pilot, right? A pilot has a pre-flight checklist. They go through it every time. You know, we've both been on tons of airplanes through the years, and a pilot does the same thing. They probably have it figured out. They could probably do the flight without a pre-flight checklist, but they're professionals. They go through the checks every single time to bring this home. Well, go on. I have a question, but go on because there's something rattling in there.
What you said is it taps into something really important of the 4th pillar. Is that what is an airplane? It is a multi-ton metal tube at 30,000 feet in the sky going 500 miles an hour. What's more risky than that? See, I've been watching Elf. What's more vulnerable than a peach? All that stuff is in my head. What's more risky? Really, what, from a position standpoint, you're in a metal tube at 30,000 feet in the air. That position is one of risk. So and yet it's the safest way to travel. You're safer there than in your car. You're safer there than on a bicycle. You're safer there than walking. You're safer there than almost anywhere on planet Earth. Less people die that way, perhaps, than any other accidental way, right? I mean, maybe getting struck by lightning is not as big, maybe. I don't know. But it's a pretty dang safe place. Why? Well, that pre-flight checklist is where the risk is addressed. And so if you have fundamental criteria and risk management criteria and position sizing criteria, and you have a checklist that an investment must match, what other people look at as insanely risky is mitigated through those criteria and checking those boxes. Doesn't eliminate the plane crash. It can still crash, but it reduces those risks significantly. And that's financial education.
I love that. I want to ask you about your pre-flight checklist in just a second, but let's do this. Let's take a quick break. Listeners, if you've ever felt like the market is controlling your emotions, that's amateur positioning, but professionals operate with clarity, rules, and discipline. That's the pre-flight checklist, if you will. When we come back, Andy's going to show us how to start thinking like a professional trader, even if you're just getting started. And don't forget to go to stockcastbonus.com, download your free tools. That's where amateur habits get replaced by professional systems. Stick around. We'll be right back.
So far, it's been great. I needed a source where I could really enrich my education through stocks. I didn't really have an avenue for it, and it's helped me a lot. The simplicity has really gotten me on the track to where I enjoy the learning as well as it's really solidifying in my mind. And like, they're not just trying to sell you something, they really care about the people that are in the course, and they really do care about you and your personal goals, and what you want to do is to help you and your family and whatever your goals are in life through that. So it's really been great.
Welcome back to Rich Dad's Stockcast. All right, so Andy, let's get practical. How does someone actually transition from amateur thinking to professional thinking? What's their pre-flight checklist, if you will?
So I don't know if this qualifies to answer that question, but I mentioned a couple things from Robert entered my mind when he started talking pro and amateur. So the first one was professionals solve problems, amateurs cause them. When he wrote the book Unfair Advantage, that was one that really sticks out in my mind, because we had a meeting in Phoenix, and he said, I'm going to write a book called The Unfair Advantage, because I've been thinking about why did I make it and other people haven't. And I've concluded I don't fight fair. You know, Shaq, that's unfair. It's just unfair. LeBron, absolutely unfair. I mean, that guy, by the time he was a senior high school, had a body of a Greek god, right? Just genetic, unfair. So that's fine. So then he said, yeah, I have some reasons that when I play the game, it's just not fair, right? When I play basketball, even in my old, fat old body, it's not fair to play against me for most people, because they're half my size, right? It's just not fair. So you go through life, you say, what blessings did God give me that give me an advantage? And he said, what's your unfair advantage? And I said, Corey Halliday, Noah Davidson. That's my unfair advantage for people. And I do have an unfair advantage if I get to tap into Corey, right? Anyone that's been through his coaching program realizes you have an unfair advantage in the markets over the people now, because you got Corey in your corner, right? So that was that. But more importantly, he said, Andy, I want you to write a little bit in this book. And here's the question he asked me. What is the difference between an amateur and a professional investor? Which is, when you said this, I was like, wow, that's the same question that Robert asked me. So I'll answer it this way. And I don't know if this is checklist wise, but even process wise, but I think it delineates the difference between the two. Amateurs manage risk by diversification because they don't know what they're doing. And Warren Buffett has said that 1,000 times. It is a confession, is what he says, him and Munger. He says, in our view, diversification is a confession that you don't know how to analyze a business and you don't know what you're doing. And so what you do as an amateur is you buy everything and hope the winners outnumber losers. And by buying everything, you've basically said, I am trying to be average by process. I'm conceding, and I'm just trying to rise my floor to average instead of trying to be better than average, which to me, every freaking piece of DNA in my body is like, I can't strive for averageness. I can't. So they manage risk by trying to be average, because then they won't get killed. They can at least say, I got a C on the test. I know I won't fail the test. I can get a C if I just strive for averages. And I don't have to do any work that way. And I don't have to think it anyway. I don't have to learn. I don't have to analyze the business. I just buy it all. I'm average. So that's how they manage their risk, is in a striving for averageness and a settling for averageness. Kenny McElroy is an infinite return guy. Man, there's no way he'd settle for the market average. No freaking way in the million. That's not even in his brain, right? The professionals manage risk through contracts and hedges. And a gambler puts money down on the roulette wheel, and once it spins, there's nothing he can do. It's a lot like marketing. You spend money on marketing, and there's not a lot of hedges in that. It is a big gamble, right? You got to have really good checklists and proof of concept before you scale up in a marketing campaign. But in terms of stock trading, once I put that trade on, the difference between gambling is I can pull that trade off. If it looks like the marble is going to land wrong, I might be able to take some of the money off. Or I might be able to say, I don't like where that marble's about to land. I want to buy insurance and make this trade over here late in the game to compensate. And that's what Shakespeare said it the first time. All these castles, a 1,000-year castle, the stones crumble, but the hawthorn bush can be replanted. And I mean, they're thick. They're 3 meters, thorns. It's a great hedge. It's a protection. So investors who are professionals have insurance, and they have a plan B and C and D, not just a plan A. So a risk taker would say, I'm going to bet that Social Security is going to be there. So I'm going to bet on it. I'm just going to live my life and bet it's going to be there. And they're either right or wrong. There's nothing they can do to manage that risk there. They're either right or wrong. Guy like me is going to say, okay, well, if it doesn't work, what's my backup plan? I don't believe my house will burn down. I'll just bet. My house ain't going to burn. Not me. I'm insurance. So amateurs manage risk via diversification and betting, or don't manage risk at all. And professionals manage risk with position sizing, with hedges, with plan Bs, with adjustments, with contracts, with promises, with insurance. And that's a huge difference between the amateur and a professional investor. The second question he asked is, what's the difference between an amateur and a professional when it comes to seeking money? How you go about earning money? And in that book, I wrote, well, amateurs are always going for capital gain, buy low, sell high. And they're always trying to predict where a price would go, which is really difficult to do. You get lucky now, the broken clock is right twice a day on that, and the other time you're really struggling. Professionals focus on earning money rather than gaining money. And they earn money through cash flow, meaning that there is a cash flow jack in the box that's doing work. The most important part of a cash flow jack in the box is the handle that spins around before the money pops out. And the money is simply evidence and proof that that work is valuable and helpful, because you're solving problems, not causing them. And so if someone caused a problem, you turn the handle, you're solving it. And as you're doing that consistently, that provides cash flow that's independent of someone's opinion on the value of the business or the gold of the coin or, whatever. That's why someone like Kenny and Than love to rent rather than flip. And even in real estate, you can force appreciation, but in stocks, you can't force appreciation. So amateurs manage risk by diversification or not at all. They take risk rather than manage it. And then professionals absolutely manage it through contracts, promises. Amateurs are trying to gain money by not working, by not having any problem solved. They just want to buy something low, sell something high, independent of what value it might be producing. It's like the late Charlie Munger. You know, if all you do is become wealthy in life by buying little pieces of paper, it's a failed life. Life is more than being shrewd in wealth accumulation. You want to do some work. You want to sell some See's candies. You know, you want to help that guy on Valentine's Day and Christmas. You know, get score points with his spouse. So that's it. Risk, they take it and they diversify it. Amateurs, professionals, they manage it and they use promises and contracts and plan Bs. Amateurs are trying to they're trying to gain money through capital gain, and investors, we're trying to earn money through cash flow and giving value. So, you know, that's long-winded, but that's the answer that I gave in Robert's book, and I stand by that today.
There you go. That's fantastic. I love that book too. I always think about that too in the back of my head. How do I create an unfair advantage? When I first read that, I was like, that's not fair. Like, everything should be fair. But hey, at the end of the day,
fair. That's rule number one for my kids. Rule freaking number one. Dad, that's not fair. Perfect. You're getting it. Great. You're getting it. Dad, that's not fair. Exactly. That's the point, son. You're getting it. Great job.
That's exactly
You're getting it. Good job.
The paradigm shift that I think everybody needs to have. Going back to professional versus amateur, we talked about processes, right? The professional works on processes as opposed to the result. My question for you is this: what are some daily or weekly habits that separate professional investors from the amateurs?
So that was a question posed at Columbia. They have a master's program at Columbia Business School, and they invited one of their alums, Warren Buffett, to come speak. And he brought a college dropout with him, a friend of him named Bill Gates. And so you have a Columbia grad and a Harvard dropout. And they asked that question to those guys. They said, what's the most important thing you do every day? And without a second of hesitation, they had the same answer come out of their mouth: learn. That's the most important thing you do every day. Learn something. Is learn and learn and learn. And Buffett spends most of his day reading. That's what he does most of the day. And he loves it. That's why he doesn't retire. He loves it. And I'm constantly, I love it. I'm learning. So when I write my books, I feel sheepish because I always start out the same way. When I write a book, I say, man, I'm a student of investing like you. I feel really weird, acting like a teacher here, because a Rich Dad Advisor is, man, we did some teaching, but people don't know behind the scenes. That wasn't about teaching. It was about a learning club. That's what it was. It was a learning club. It was a secret society. It was a handful of, it was like the size of a Navy SEAL team that learned a lot. And then once in a while we'd go outside the room and teach something. But it really was a learning club that was really cool for like 14 years.
I love that. I love that idea of learning club and like a secret society. I remember being in a book club with Than Merrill, one of our mutual friends, and it was such a great time in my life for growth. And I think everybody should have one.
There you go. That's a professional. That dude, you want to know what a professional is? That dude. Yeah, that's professional. So yeah, learning. That's the number one process there. Accounting, KPIs, leadership. Maybe this is a good way to land. So I've talked about what I've learned from others the whole time. There is one thing that in my own ponderings, as an educator, I noticed there was a problem with people. Is people viewed themselves as black and white, knowing something or not knowing something. And it got people in a lot of trouble. On the one side, they wouldn't give themselves credit for what they did know. But far more dangerous is when people thought they knew things that they didn't. And it was worse. I don't know why. I'll be, this is maybe, it would be the opposite of misogyny, because I'm going to give the women credit, but it's a gender thing that you get canceled for if you do the men and women thing. but I just think men are worse. I just think women have less. There's women that have a problem with it, but less so than men. Is a man becomes aware, and now he thinks he confuses awareness with proficiency. He thinks he knows it. Like, I'll give you an example. I'll talk about options, and I'll say, hey, what do you know? Let's talk about call options. Oh, I know what a call option is. I know that. I call option. I even trade them. I know that. Okay, you do, huh? And so what I did is I thought that's a real problem, because those are the people that just get their butts kicked and they blow up their account. It's only a matter of time before they realize they maybe were a little lucky in a bull market, and then it turns bearish and they lose everything. It's like in the 90s when everyone was a day trader. You couldn't miss. Everything was going up. How do you suck in the 90s? Everything's going up. Right. Then 2000.com hits, and it's separate. Like Buffett says, when the ocean goes out, now you see who's naked, right? Who's swimming without any clothes on. And so I developed this thing called the Education Continuum, because I said, as an educator, people should know that education isn't, you don't. Like when I started to learn to play the drums and the piano, it wasn't, I learned, it wasn't like on one day, I was not a drummer, and then finally the next day I woke up and I was a drummer. It was a progression of being totally unable just to hit something to where you could do some rudiments, right? And you could be proficient. And so as I thought about that continuum, there was ignorance, meaning I don't know anything about it. Some people call it the stuff you don't know that you don't know, right? Or that you know that you don't know. That's the ignorance thing. Then you have awareness, and that's where people really screwed up, because once they become aware of something, they think they put themselves as, oh, I know this now. Well, I know what that is. No, you're aware of it. You're aware of it. It has a name, right? I'm aware. The next level is what we call competence, and that's what school tries to do. That's where you could pass a test. You're competent. You can pass the test. You can get an A. But you can still be functionally incompetent. Amateurs are functionally incompetent. They're book smart. They get A's. I worry. My son's a 4.0 student, but can he help someone in the real world? Can he solve a problem as an entrepreneur? Does that 4.0 allow him to leave my nest and solve problems for people in any of the cash flow quadrants? In any of them? Can you solve a problem? Because that's what you've got to do, is solve a problem. And many 4.0 students, they can't solve a problem. They're inept functionally. So then you hit the edge of the continuum that's valuable, and it comes from the word proficiency, which I don't know if professional means you profess like a professor, or if it means proficiency. I don't know the etymology. I have no idea. But to me, professionalism means I'm proficient. Proficient, which one is it? I think I choose a proficient guy more than a professing guy. I have a lot of guys that are grateful to have them on my podcast that are PhD guys. Some of them are really, really smart and really, really good. Others, I'll go off the air because I'm never going to embarrass a guest. I'm not a guy, I'm not going to turn my microphone into an interview weapon. But I'll often ask these PhD guys after we'll have a little session. I'll say, "What are you buying? What are you investing in?" "Oh, I don't invest. I don't actually do it. I just study the economy." "So you don't use this knowledge to buy assets?" "No, I just analyze it. I just like to analyze." I go, "Why don't you invest?" "Well, that's not my thing." Well, then, huh? So there's a lot of guys that are PhD level that just were school career, and they're competent, but they're not proficient. So the question is, all right, great. And Robert says your report card is your financial statement, because that lets you know if you can do it. And if you look at my financial statement, you can see some pretty bad grades at times where I've failed. And that's where I have to meet, okay, we got to raise that grade. There's other parts of my financial statement where a guy says, man, he can demonstrate that's a proficient deal right there. That's pretty good. That's not bad. So what is an amateur and professional? Professionals are proficient, and they exist and push the limits at the end of that education continuum. And they have, and when you talk about my process, is when I say I'm going to learn something, I say, okay, what do I know about technical analysis? I look at that education continuum and I say, where am I? And what that does is it helps me have proper proportions of where I am, where I don't confuse an awareness arrogantly with proficiency. And so I changed the way I ask people. I don't say, well, do you know what do you know what a covered call is? Oh yeah, I know all that. I go, I changed the question. I don't say, do you know what I don't say, what do you even know about covered calls? I say this: if you look at the education continuum in a scale from ignorance, awareness, competency, or proficiency, professionalism, proficiency, where do you place yourself when it comes to covered calls? And people will say, probably between awareness and competency, maybe. Okay, where would you like to be? Well, I'd like to be proficient. There you go, baby. Now you're moving. So when you talk about my process of becoming a professional, I equate that with the proficiency to solve problems. And it's on a continuum where we can evaluate what do you know about debt? When people say, Andy, they think it's about the asset. It drives me freaking nuts, Del. Andy, what do you think about Bitcoin? Is that better than stock? Oh, what do you think about stock? Is that better than business? What do you think about real estate? Is that better than gold? They think it's the asset class. And I flip it to me and I say, well, when it comes to crypto, where do you exist on the continuum? That will answer whether that asset class is good for you to hop into or requires more study. Because it's not a function of the asset, it's a function of where you exist on that continuum, as ignorant, which would be amateur, all the way up. And there's probably levels, a continuum of amateur to professional that's not black and white, right? I'm not a proficient drummer like Neil Peart was, or Stuart Copeland, or John Bonham, or Scott Rockenfield, right? I'm not there. I'm not Buddy Rich, but I'm also not, I'm not horrible. So I have a level of proficiency on that continuum where I can, if you're a good drummer, you kind of know I'm not great, but if you're not a drummer, you had no idea. I can get along with it. So that's probably true with amateurism and professionalism, is that I probably caused some problems and I probably solved some problems.
There you go. I love that. All right. Final question, Andy. How do you feel about Bitcoin? No, I'm only kidding. We're not doing that. The final question.
I feel like I'm aware.
I'm aware. There we go.
I feel like I'm aware. Yeah, not proficient in that one.
But speaking of proficiency, if someone wants to be a professional, they want to be more proficient at stock trading and being an investor, what's the first step someone should take?
Go to stock. It's always the same on this podcast. Go to stockcastbonus.com and learn about those 6 numbers and start becoming proficient. That's, the only reason a person wouldn't go is if they thought, they can get caught in that same trap. Well, I'm aware of those. I know that. Are you proficient? Well, let me see your financial statement. Oh, I'm not proficient. Oh, well, it's time to learn then, if you want to. The advice culture, it's tough because it's so deeply ingrained. Tell me what to do. What should I buy? That's why Wall Street's rich. I don't try to sell personal development as much as I probably should, because you can lead a horse to water. You just can't make him drink. And, we have our tribe, and those that are in our tribe, we care about it. And if people want to join our tribe, that's fine. Join a different tribe.
There we go.
So that's what I have to say. That's what people can do. They can go to stockcastbonus.com and bang.
I love it. Well, thank you very much. Professional investors aren't smarter. They're more disciplined. They don't guess. They don't panic. They don't chase. They follow systems. That's what they do. Andy, big thank you for laying out what really separates amateurs from professionals. I learned a ton from this podcast. Listener, if you're ready to raise your investing standards, go to stockcastbonus.com right now. You'll find free tools, resources to help you to think clearer, manage risk better, invest with confidence. And if this episode helped you like it did for me, make sure you like, subscribe, share it with someone who's tired of guessing and ready to invest like a pro. You're not here by accident. You're building something that most people won't. So stay smart, stay invested, and we'll see you next time.
This podcast is a presentation of Rich Dad Media Network.